Hello everyone, welcome back to our video. Hope y'all have an amazing day as usual. For new, please make sure to like, subscribe, and always comment down below. So in my last video, I took a look at my favorite part of each state. So the best area of each state, whether that would be a county, a metro area, or a beautiful rural area. I feel that if I was going to visit the state or if I was going to move to the state, this is the part I would live in. So my original plan was to do all 50 states in that video, but the video is like 15 minutes long, and if I did all 50 states, it'd be, I think, too long of a video. So I'm going to chop it up into part 2. So this is part 2. Without further ado, let's look at the best area in each state. So for the state of Nevada, I chose the Reno area. I did not choose the Las Vegas area because I feel that it is just way too hot and chaotic in the Las Vegas area, so I chose the Reno area. Reno is here, which is nicknamed the biggest little city in the world. Reno is a pretty cool place. It has a small gambling and casino scene, definitely not as big as Las Vegas, but there still are casinos and resorts all over the place. Of course, this part of the state is also home to Lake Tahoe, which is the icing on the cake, and is one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. There's even a small forest in the state, which is pretty rare for Nevada. For the state of New Hampshire, my favorite part would have to be the south central part of the state. This includes the city of Manchester, which is the largest city in New Hampshire. This is pretty much the only place in the state that has a real big city vibe to it and has some culture. It's definitely not as cold, dark, or depressing as other parts of the state. It has a blue-collar vibe and is still pretty rough around the edges, but I like it. There's also Nashua, which is also a decent place in this part of the state. For the state of New Jersey, my home state, I had to choose the southern part of the state. This includes the Philly metro area and the rural parts of the state, although I did not include the Jersey Shore because I just think it's too chaotic and I'm not a big beach person. This part of the state is home to the Pine Barrens, which is one of the most isolated parts of the Mid-Atlantic. For miles and miles, there's nothing but basically pine trees. It's very beautiful, but also has kind of a scary, eerie, and barren type of vibe. The southwestern part of New Jersey is also where most of the state's agriculture comes from. There's also a lot of swamps along the Delaware Bay in South Jersey. Overall, the reason why I prefer this part of the state over North Jersey is because it's a much slower pace of life. It's far more cheaper, people are more friendly, and there's less attitudes. You're also very close to Philadelphia, which is one of my favorite cities. For the state of New Mexico, I chose the southeastern part of the state. This is home to the city of Roswell, where the UFOs crashed in 1947. What's also pretty cool is how a lot of the stores here are alien-themed, like this McDonald's and this Dunkin' Donuts. There's even some forest areas in this part of the state. Can you believe that this is New Mexico? For New York, I chose the suburbs north of New York City, so generally anything north of New York and south of Albany. I chose this area because New York City is too chaotic. Even though I love New York, I have to admit this is the best part of the state. This is home to the city of Kingston, which is a really nice city, has some really nice restaurants, and is a pretty touristy place. This is home to the Catskills, which has some beautiful mountains. There's also Bear Mountain, there's lakes, there's ponds, there's rivers, there's creeks, there's plenty of hiking. This is really just a beautiful part of the state. You also have Catskills Falls, which is breathtaking in my opinion. And you can take a ride on the Metro North commuter rail from Poughkeepsie all the way down to Grand Central on the Hudson Line, which is a scenic railroad with beautiful views of the Hudson. For the state of North Carolina, the only state that I really have a liking for would have to be the western part of the state. This is one of the most forested and mountainous regions in the south, and it's right along the Appalachian Trail. This part of the state is also home to the city of Asheville, which is one of the most beautiful and touristy towns in North Carolina. Of course, you are right in the middle of the Smoky Mountains, so there are plenty of forests, waterfalls, rivers, and mountains to explore. And honestly, this is the only part of North Carolina I could see myself visiting. North Dakota might be the most boring state in America, but if I had to choose anywhere, it would be the southeastern part of the state. There are plenty of rolling hills in this area, and this part of the state is really important for agriculture. It gets a little cold, but it's still better than nothing. And you have the city of Fargo, which really isn't super special, but it's better than nothing. For the state of Ohio, I would have to choose the northeastern part of the state. This part of the state is home to the city of Cleveland, which might be the most interesting city in Ohio outside of Columbus. While Cleveland has a bad reputation, it's definitely making a comeback and is a lot better than people think. It's also a very queer-friendly city for people in the LGBTQ community. And of course, you're right on the Great Lakes. To be more specific, Lake Erie, which is probably the worst of the Great Lakes, but it's still very beautiful, although you do get a lot of lake effect snow. For the state of Oklahoma, which is a very boring state, I would have to say that the northeastern part of Oklahoma is the best. In this part of the state is the city of Tulsa, and while Tulsa is a pretty boring city, I think it is still better than Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is even more boring. Tulsa is a pretty decent place. I don't have anything bad to say about it. There are also several Native American reservations, like the Cherokee Nation, in this part of the state, and you also have some really nice small towns scattered here and there. This part of the state is also very pretty. You actually have forests and lakes, some real scenery in Oklahoma. For Oregon, I would have to say the further away you get from Portland, the better the state gets, but realistically, that's not true because eastern Oregon is kind of boring, so I chose the south central part of the state. In this part of the state, you'll find Crater Lake National Park, which has some of the most beautiful scenery in the country. It's almost unreal how beautiful it is. You'll also find some small towns here and there, so it's pretty nice around here. It's also where the desert meets the green part of the state, so it's pretty interesting for geography. For the state of Pennsylvania, as much as I love the city of Philadelphia, I have to admit that the surrounding parts of southeastern Pennsylvania are kind of boring, so therefore I am choosing the northeastern part of the state. This part of the state is home to the Pocono Mountains and is probably the most beautiful part of Pennsylvania. Here you'll find many lakes, creeks, rivers, mountains, places to ski, Airbnbs. A lot of people vacation in the Poconos just because of how beautiful it is. You also have a lot of really nice small towns like Honesdale in northeastern Pennsylvania. There's also Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, which aren't really that cool, but this region as a whole is very nice. Although Rhode Island is such a small state, if I had to choose the best part, it would be the eastern half of this small state. This is home to the city of Providence, the largest city in Rhode Island. It's a very old city, and it's very historic. There are plenty of restaurants, nightlife scene, and it's just a beautiful city. Warwick is nearby, and it's also a pretty nice city. And this part of the state has a really pretty coastline. For the state of South Carolina, the best part of the state would be the southern part, without a doubt. Here you'll find the city of Charleston, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the South. It's very historic, and it's almost like a mini New Orleans in a way. It has a very similar French architecture and even has a French corridor. You'll find that Charleston is a little more upscale than the rest of South Carolina. Hilton Head Island has some of the most beautiful beaches on the East Coast, and you'll find that many people visit Hilton Head Island. There are plenty of hotels and resorts as well. This area is growing pretty fast, and a lot of retirees are moving to southern South Carolina. And if you're into golfing, there are plenty of golf courses all over this part of the state. For South Dakota, my favorite part of the state would have to be the southwestern part of the state. This part of the state is home to Mount Rushmore, and although I think it's a very, very impressive structure, I think it's a little overrated. Plus, you can't even get that close, I think. You'll find many open fields and rolling hills in this part of the state as well. And of course, you have Badlands National Park. I would actually visit Badlands National Park before you visit Mount Rushmore. It's a lot more beautiful, picturesque, and scenic. Can you believe that this is South Dakota? For Tennessee, my favorite part would have to be the eastern part of the state. This part of the state is home to the Smoky Mountains, which are some of the most beautiful mountains in the eastern part of the country. And the elevations here are surprisingly high for the eastern part of the U.S. Of course, you have Gatlinburg, which is a very touristy town. It's pretty nice, but when all the tourists are here, it feels like this place is going to sink with all these tourists. There's also Pigeon Forge, which is also a touristy town, but it's not as cool as Gatlinburg. Also, if you're into Dolly Parton, there's Dollywood, which is a really popular amusement park in Tennessee, and the city of Knoxville, which is also a very nice city. For Texas, my favorite part of the state would have to be the southeastern part of the state, and I'm also including the U.S.-Mexico border as well. Of course, there's Houston, which is one of the most sprawling metro areas in the country and is probably the largest American city in terms of size. Downtown Houston itself is very nice. There's also some nicer areas like Midtown, and a lot of people complain that Houston is a very unwalkable city, but there are still plenty of mixed-use walkable neighborhoods all across Houston. Of course, there's beaches. The most famous beach town is Galveston. It has beautiful white sandy beaches, but the waters here are kind of brown, and the city's a little rough around the edges. Eastern Texas is also probably where the most forests in Texas are located. There's also several swamps and bayous in southeastern Texas. As you get down to the US-Mexico border, you have the city of Brownsville, which is very Hispanic, and it almost feels like you're in Mexico. In fact, it's right across the border from Matamoros, and right as you leave downtown, that's where the border crossing is. So you can pretty much walk between Brownsville and Matamoros, Mexico. Utah is one of the most beautiful states in the country, and there's no place more beautiful in Utah than the southeastern part of the state. This part of the state is home to Arches National Park, which has beautiful red rock vistas. The scenery in this part of the state is absolutely gorgeous and almost doesn't look real. That's how beautiful it really is here. There are also many hiking and biking trails in this park. There's also several canyons in this part of the state, and other than the small town of Moab, there really isn't that much development in this part of the state, and that's probably why it's so beautiful. It's just really desolate. For the state of Vermont, there's no part of the state that I dislike, but if I was going to have to choose my favorite, it would have to be the central part of the state. The largest city in central Vermont is Rutland, but it only has a population of 15,000. That's actually pretty big for Vermont standards. It's a pretty nice town, a decent place to live, and kind of charming. And then there's Woodstock, which is ranked as one of the nicest, most charming towns in New England. It has a very local feel to it. There's a lot of shops and boutiques here. Almost everything is family owned, and it just has kind of like this quaint, nice, small town vibe to it, and the surrounding area is very beautiful. As you can imagine, during the fall, Vermont is absolutely gorgeous, and this part of the state is no exception. For the state of Virginia, the best part of the state, in my opinion, would be the southwest corner of the state. This is home to the Cumberland Plateau, which is a pretty nice mountain on the border of Virginia and Tennessee. You also have the city of Bristol, which half of the city's in Virginia, the other half is in Tennessee, and it's actually divided by a street in the downtown area. This part of the state is pretty rural and pretty isolated, so for the most part, it's nothing but a bunch of mountains and valleys. For Washington State, I'm going to go with the far northern part of the state. This includes the Cascade Mountains and several state parks and national forests. The scenery out here is absolutely beautiful, and the reason why I chose this part of the state is really the closer you get to Canada, the more the scenery really starts to kick in, and this part of the state is unbelievably beautiful. For the state of West Virginia, the best part would have to be the eastern panhandle in the state. One of the coolest towns in this part of the state is Harper's Ferry, but the population is only about 300, but many tourists come, and it's only about an hour drive from D.C. This is also the town where the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers meet up, so you can imagine it's really, really beautiful here. Another place, which is a little bit bigger, is Martinsburg, and it's a pretty nice town, especially for West Virginia standards. And of course, it's West Virginia, so you have the beautiful mountains in Appalachia just about everywhere. Just like West Virginia, my favorite part of Wisconsin has to be the Panhandle. Due to this part of the state's location, there are plenty of beaches and lighthouses in the Panhandle of Wisconsin. It's also home to the city of Green Bay, one of the smallest cities in America to have a professional sports team. In fact, the Green Bay Packers are pretty much the most popular football team. You're right on the Green Bay, which gets its name because of the color of the bay. It's kind of a greenish color. And you have Lake Michigan, one of the most beautiful lakes. For Wyoming, the best part of the state would have to be the southwestern part of Wyoming. This part of the state is smack dab in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, and this is one of the most isolated and desolate places in America. You have beautiful mountains, open land, and you really get a western vibe here. And what's crazy is there are places where there are no trees for miles and miles. Okay, so that was the end of part 2 for the best places in each state. So I just want to let y'all know that this is my opinion, okay? Like I said in the beginning of the video, if I was going to visit or move to this state, this is the part that I would choose, okay? That's going to be it for today's video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and God bless to all you guys.